You ever look back at one single ordinary day and realize it was the exact moment your entire life split in two? For me, that day was Tuesday, October 12th, 2004. I was 37 years old, married 15 years, mother of a 14-year-old daughter named Madison and a 12-year-old son named Ethan. We lived in a 2-story colonial on Maple Crest Lane in a suburb outside Grand Rapids, Michigan. White siding, navy shutters, the kind of house people slow down to admire on their evening walks. Everyone said we were the perfect family. Mark was the charming, hardworking owner of Richardson Building Supply. I was the devoted stay-at-home mom who baked for PTA fundraisers and coached the middle school cheer squad. We went to church every Sunday, sat in the same pew, held hands during the prayers. Neighbors told me constantly how lucky I was. That Tuesday started like every other Tuesday. Mark kissed me goodbye at 7:42 a.m. while I was pouring his coffee into the stainless steel travel mug I'd bought him for Father's Day. He was wearing the blue pinpoint shirt I'd ironed the night before and the cologne I'd gifted him the Christmas before that. He smelled like cedar and safety and every promise we made the day we said, I do. He told me he had a big client meeting in Grand Rapids, some new Home Depot contract that could finally dig us out of the credit card debt we'd been carrying since the housing slowdown. He promised he'd be home by 8 with lasagna from Gino's and maybe even a bottle of that red wine we liked. He ruffled Ethan's hair, reminded Madison to turn in her algebra homework, and kissed me one more time, slow and soft, the way he always did when he thought no one was watching. I waved from the porch, smiling the same smile I'd worn for 15 years, and watched his silver Tahoe disappear around the corner. That's when the envelope fell out of his jacket pocket. It hit the hardwood floor with a soft slap. Thick, cream-colored paper, expensive, the kind nobody uses for bills. No return address. Just my husband's name, written in red ink, in handwriting that curled like a woman's. I picked it up. My fingers already knew something was wrong before my brain caught up. I should have left it on the counter for him to find when he got home. I should have trusted the man I'd built a life with. I didn't. I carried it into the laundry room, closed the door, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. Mark. My Mark. Shirt unbuttoned to his chest, arms slung around a blonde woman I had never seen before. They were laughing in a cheap motel room with ugly wood paneling and a flickering neon vacancy sign bleeding through thin curtains. On the white border at the bottom, written in the same red ink, were the words, "Tomorrow, same time, room 12. Wear the blue tie I like. Heart." My knees actually gave out. I slid down the washing machine and sat on the cold tile floor. The picture trembling so hard, the image blurred. My first thought was that it was fake. A prank, Photoshop, a look-alike, anything but the truth staring me in the face. Then I did something I had never done in 15 years of marriage. I lied to my children. I walked back into the kitchen, forced the same smile I'd worn on the porch, and told Madison and Ethan I had to run to the pharmacy to pick up Grandma's blood pressure pills, and that I'd be right back. I grabbed my keys, got in the minivan, and I followed my husband. I caught his Tahoe 23 minutes later on Old State Road 131, heading north, the exact opposite direction from Grand Rapids. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the radio. I stayed 3 or 4 cars back, far enough that he'd never spot me. He drove 47 miles, past cornfields turning gold, past billboards for apple orchards and cider mills, until the exit sign read, Cedar Ridge, 2 miles. Then he turned into the parking lot of the Starlight Inn. You know the kind of place. 1 story, 20 units, half the neon burned out so it just read STARLT Inn. Gravel lot, rusted ice machine, doors painted the color of dried blood. The sort of motel people only stop at when they don't want their name on a register. I pulled into the Dollar General across the street, parked behind a delivery truck, and waited. He got out, looked left and right like he was expecting someone to jump him, then walked straight to room 12. The door opened before he even knocked. A blonde woman, early 30s, barefoot, wearing one of his dress shirts and nothing else, pulled him inside and shut the door so fast I barely saw her face. I sat there for 2 hours and 19 minutes. I watched the curtains move. I watched shadows cross the window. I watched the neon light flicker on and off like it was trying to warn me. When they finally came out, she was smoking a cigarette, messy hair, barefoot on the cracked concrete. He was carrying a black overnight bag I had never seen before. They kissed like they were drowning, long and slow, right there in daybreak where anyone driving by could see. Then he handed her the bag, got back in his truck, and drove away.
I followed again. This time he turned down a gravel service road that cut behind the industrial park everyone in town knew had been abandoned since the recession. I killed my headlights and crept behind him at 20 miles an hour, praying he wouldn't look in the rearview mirror. He parked beside a windowless warehouse with a faded sign that used to say Carter & Sons Plumbing Supply. 2 other vehicles were already there. A black Suburban with windows tinted so dark they looked illegal, and a white box truck with no plates. Mark got out carrying the overnight bag. A man in a black hoodie and work gloves met him at the roll-up door, scanned the tree line once, then raised the door just enough for Mark to duck under. I waited in the dark for 3 hours and 41 minutes. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged the windows. I turned the engine off to save gas and sat in total silence, watching that metal door like it was the gateway to hell. At 12:07 a.m., the door rolled up again. Mark stepped out first. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, even though it was 42 degrees outside. His hair was wet at the temples, and there, on the left side of his chest, spreading outward like a dark flower, was a stain I prayed was oil. It wasn't. He kept looking over his shoulder the entire time he walked to his truck, like he expected someone to come running out after him. He fumbled the keys twice before he got the door open. Then he drove away. I followed at a distance until he turned back toward home. I got there first, slipped into bed still wearing my coat, and pretended to be asleep when he crawled in at 2:27 a.m., smelling of cheap perfume, cigarette smoke, and something metallic I didn't want to name. The next morning, he kissed my forehead and asked how I slept. I smiled and said perfect. That was the exact second everything changed, because that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to cry, I wasn't going to pack a bag and destroy my children's lives with a divorce and whatever nightmare he was obviously part of. I was going to become the best secret keeper he ever met. And one day, when the time was perfect, I was going to make him beg. That night in October 2004, when I crawled into bed still wearing my coat and pretended to be asleep while my husband washed someone else's blood off his hands, I made a promise to myself. I was done being the naive wife. From that moment forward, I became something else entirely, a hunter. People think revenge is loud, screaming fights, slammed doors, lawyers, tears. Mine was silent. Cold, surgical, and it lasted 20 years. The very next week, I started building my arsenal. First came the GPS tracker. I ordered it online under the name of a fake LLC, paid with a prepaid Visa I bought at Walmart with cash. I installed it under the wheel well of his Tahoe while he was at Thursday night poker with the guys. Took me 11 minutes with a YouTube tutorial and a flashlight between my teeth. Then, the cameras. Tiny, wireless, motion activated. One in the air vent of his truck, one sewn into the lining of his golf bag, and one hidden in the fake smoke detector above his desk in the home office. Battery life of 6 months, cloud storage under an encrypted account only I could access. Then the phone clone. He had a second phone, of course he did. A cheap burner he kept in the locked bottom drawer. I waited until he passed out after too much bourbon one Saturday night, lifted his keys, took the phone to the garage, and mirrored it with software I found on a dark web forum. Every text, every photo, every call now came to me in real time. And finally, the voice-activated recorders. I bought a dozen of the smallest ones money could buy, sewed them into the hem of his favorite winter coat, the shoulder pad of his suit jacket, and even the lining of the briefcase he carried to client meetings. I became a ghost in my own marriage, and what I learned in those first 6 months almost broke me all over again. Her name was Crystal Delaney, 32 years old, former trade show model who worked the construction expos in Vegas, Chicago, Orlando. That's where they met in March 2003. She was paid to stand in a tight dress and hand out brochures. He was supposed to be sourcing tile samples. Instead, he sourced her. They had a system. Tuesdays and Thursdays were their days. He told me he had standing supplier meetings. He told Crystal I was a nagging, frigid wife who hadn't touched him in years. She believed him because he paid for everything: rent, car, clothes, the little blue pills he needed to keep up with the woman 15 years younger. But the affair was the least of it. The warehouse wasn't just a meeting place. It was a chop shop. Stolen skid steers, generators, copper pipe, entire pallets of high-end tools disappeared from job sites all over the Midwest, got trucked to that warehouse at night, serial numbers ground off, repainted, then sold for cash to shady contractors across state lines. Mark wasn't a participant. He was the money man.
He laundered the profits through fake invoices at Richardson Building Supply, created shell companies with names like West Shore Tile Distributors and Northern Lumber Holdings, paid kickbacks to inspectors to look the other way, took his cut in cash every Thursday night, stuffed into that same black overnight bag he handed Crystal like a weekly allowance. And the men he worked with, they weren't accountants in polo shirts. They were ex-cons, bikers. One guy who did 15 years for manslaughter and still had the prison tattoos on his neck. They solved problems permanently. One giver who started asking too many questions vanished in 2007. They found his truck at the bottom of Lake Michigan 2 years later. The body was never recovered. I had the audio of Mark laughing about it in the warehouse, drunk on cheap whiskey, bragging that sometimes you gotta feed the fish. I listened to that recording on loop for 3 days straight, sitting in my car in the high school parking lot while Madison was at cheer practice, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Then I dried my face, fixed my makeup, and went back to being the perfect wife. Because I had decided I wasn't leaving. I wasn't letting him destroy our children's lives with a scandal and a divorce. I was going to collect every piece of his double life until I owned him completely. And for the next 20 years, that's exactly what I did. Year after year, milestone after milestone. I smiled while I buried him. 2005. Madison's first homecoming dance. I helped her pick out a dress while Mark was wiring $15,000 to Crystal's account for a girls' trip to Cabo. 2008. Ethan's bar mitzvah. We aren't Jewish, but his best friend was, and Mark insisted on throwing the party of the year. I planned the entire thing while listening to live audio of Mark and Crystal having sex in room 12 at the Starlight. 2012. Madison's high school graduation. We threw a backyard party for 100 people. Mark gave a tearful speech about how proud he was of his little girl.
2 hours later, he was at the warehouse counting cash from a stolen Bobcat sale. 2017, Ethan's wedding. I danced with my son while Mark slow danced with Crystal at the reception after slipping out to take a call. 2019, our 25th anniversary cruise to Alaska. I toasted to my soulmate in front of 300 strangers while knowing he'd just paid for Crystal's breast augmentation because she felt insecure after turning 40. Every Christmas, every birthday, every ordinary Tuesday, I added to the collection. Terabytes of video, thousands of photographs, bank records, shipping manifests, text messages, license plates, faces, voices. I built a library of evidence that could put him away for life, and I kept it in a fireproof safe hidden behind a false wall in my walk-in closet. He never noticed the closet was 2 feet shorter than it used to be. He was too busy living his lie. And through it all, Crystal aged right alongside us. The blonde got darker, the body got tighter thanks to his money, the laugh lines got deeper. She moved into a condo he bought under a shell company in 2010, drove cars registered in her sister's name, posted vague Instagram quotes about living my truth, while I folded my husband's laundry and packed his lunches. Sometimes I would park outside her building at 2 a.m., just to watch the lights go on and off, feeling nothing but ice-cold patience. People started calling me the luckiest woman in town. Mark and Emily still holding hands after all these years. If only they knew. But the one thing that kept me going, the one recording I listened to every single night before I fell asleep, was the audio from 2010, the night they made a man disappear. Mark's voice, drunk and laughing. He thought he could threaten us, thought he could go to the cops. You see the look on his face when he realized the truck wasn't stopping? Another voice. Fish gotta eat too, brother. Mark again. Exactly. And the lake's deep, real deep. I played that clip so many times I wore out 2 different sets of earbuds, because that was the night I stopped loving him and started planning the day he would finally pay. March 2023. 19 years after that first Tuesday in October, Mark started coughing in the shower one morning. Not a smoker's cough, a wet, rattling sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest and wouldn't stop. He laughed it off at first, just a spring cold, then allergies, then maybe bronchitis. By June, the doctor used the words no one wants to hear. Stage 4 small cell lung cancer. Inoperable, aggressive, metastases in the liver, the bones, the lymph nodes. Median survival 4 to 6 months with chemo, maybe 8 if he was lucky. He wasn't lucky.
He came home from that appointment white as paper, hands shaking so badly he couldn't get the key in the door. For the first time in 20 years, I saw real animal fear in his eyes. The same fear I'd seen that night at the warehouse when he walked out with someone else's blood on his shirt. And something inside me clicked into place. The clock had finally started running in my favor. He spent the first month trying to outrun death the way he'd outrun everything else. Denial, bargaining, rage. He started shredding documents in the backyard fire pit at 3 a.m. He took a hammer to old hard drives in the garage. He made panicked phone calls I could hear through the recorder still sewn into his winter coat, telling Crystal to clean out anything with my name on it, telling his warehouse partners to make sure the books are gone, telling someone I never identified to find that old driver's insurance policy, just in case. He thought he could erase 20 years of crimes the same way he'd erased me from his real life. He had no idea I'd already preserved every second of it. While he was busy trying to destroy evidence, I was busy preparing the final stage. I turned our master bedroom into a confession room, installed a 4K camera in the crown molding above his side of the bed, told him it was a new baby monitor for when the grandkids slept over, ran the cable through the attic to a locked recorder in my closet, bought a second identical recorder that would live stream to the cloud in case he found the first one, stocked the safe with 20 years of printed proof, bank records, GPS logs, still photos from the hidden cameras, transcripts of the worst conversations, the original Polaroid from 2004 preserved in a plastic sleeve like a death warrant. I practiced my speech in the mirror every night after he fell asleep, until the words felt like ice water in my veins. I waited until the doctor gave him 4 to 6 weeks. By then, he was bedridden. Oxygen tubes in his nose 24/7, skin the color of old newspaper, hands that shook so badly the hospice nurse had to hold the water glass for him. He barely left the bed anymore. The world had shrunk to 4 walls, a morphine pump, and the sound of his own wheezing. One Thursday night in early October, 19 years almost to the day since that first Tuesday, I waited until the night nurse left at 10 p.m. Then I locked the bedroom door, turned the oxygen down just enough that he stayed conscious but couldn't scream, pulled my chair right up to his side of the bed so he could see my eyes, and I opened the safe. I took my time. I laid the evidence out on the blanket around him like a deck of cards only I knew how to play. First, the photographs, hundreds of them, printed and glossy. Him and Crystal in motels, in her condo, in the front seat of his truck. Then the bank records showing 6-figure cash deposits that never matched his salary. Then the USB drives, each one labeled with a year and the worst thing he did that year. Then the shipping manifests with his forged signatures. Then the audio transcripts, page after page of him laughing about feeding the fish, bragging about how much money he made while I clipped coupons. And finally, at the very center of the bed, the original Polaroid from 2004, the one that started it all. His eyes went wide. The heart monitor started racing. For the first time in 20 years, my husband looked at me and saw not his devoted wife, but his judge, jury, and executioner. I leaned in close enough that he could smell the same Chanel he bought me every Christmas while he bought Crystal diamonds. And in the calmest voice I have ever used, I told him exactly what was going to happen next. He was going to confess. Everything. Every crime, every dollar, every Tuesday and Thursday he spent inside another woman while I raised his children alone. Every name, every date, every body of water he helped fill. He was going to look straight into that camera and tell the world what kind of monster he really was. And he was going to do it willingly, clearly, and with real remorse. Because if he didn't, every piece of evidence on that bed was going to be delivered before sunrise. To the FBI field office in Detroit, to Crystal's front door with a big red bow, to our children with a handwritten letter explaining why their father was going to prison, and to every major news outlet from here to Chicago. I watched the fight drain out of him drop by drop. He cried, he begged, he tried to say he loved me, that Crystal was a mistake, that the money was for us, for the kids, for a better life. I didn't move. I just reminded him that cancer had already taken everything except his voice, and even that was temporary. Then I pressed record. The red light blinked on, and my husband started talking. The red light on the camera blinked once and stayed steady. October 5th, 2023, 10:17 p.m. The only sounds in the room were the hiss of the oxygen, the beep of the heart monitor, and the wet rattle in Mark's chest that told me we didn't have much time. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, and I waited. He knew there was no way out. For the next 5 hours and 42 minutes, my husband confessed to everything. He started with the affair because that was the easiest lie to peel off. His voice was barely a whisper, cracked and ruined from the cancer, but every word went straight into the microphone. He told the camera how he met Crystal at a trade show in Las Vegas in March 2003, how she smiled at him across a booth of granite samples, how she slipped her hotel key into his hand while I was home helping Madison with 8th grade algebra, how Tuesdays and Thursdays became their days for 19 straight years, how he paid for her condo, her Lexus, her lip fillers, her everything, while I drove a 10-year-old minivan with a cracked windshield. He cried when he admitted he used to tell Crystal I was cold, distant, that I hadn't touched him in years. He cried harder when he realized I had every text message where he said exactly that. Then he moved on to the money. He listed every shell company by name, every fake invoice, every cash drop, every crooked inspector he paid off with envelopes of hundreds. He admitted the warehouse had moved over $14 million in stolen equipment since 2004. He admitted his personal take was just under $3 million, laundered through life insurance policies, college funds, and the addition we put on the house in 2015. He named every partner still alive, men who coach Little League, men who sit on the church board, men who shook my hand at Ethan's wedding and told me what a lucky woman I was. Then he got to the part I had waited 20 years to hear, the disappearances. There were 3. 2007, Tommy Rivera, a driver who threatened to go to the police. Mark drove the Suburban that night. They weighted him with cinder blocks and dropped him in Lake Michigan 20 miles offshore. Mark still remembered the sound the body made when it hit the black water. 2010, Paul Gagnon, an accountant who found discrepancies. Mark held the flashlight while they put 2 rounds in the back of his head behind the warehouse. They dissolved what was left in a 55-gallon drum of acid. Mark said he threw up for 3 days straight after that one. 2018, a rookie cop named Derek Holt who started asking too many questions after a traffic stop. They staged a drunk driving accident on an icy road. Mark signed the phony overtime logs that put Derek alone on patrol that night. He recited the details like he was reading from a list he'd kept in his head for years, waiting for the day it would finally destroy him. And when he got to Crystal again, his voice broke completely. He admitted he had planned to leave me the year Madison graduated college. He had divorce papers drafted, a condo picked out in Florida, a new life waiting. He admitted the only reason he stayed was because I would have taken everything in court, and his partners would have killed him for the exposure. He looked straight into the lens, tears cutting tracks through the sweat on his face, and said the words I had dreamed of for 2 decades. I am a coward. I committed crimes I can never take back. I destroyed the only woman who ever truly loved me for money and a lie I told myself was love. Emily, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I never did. When he finished, the heart monitor was racing so fast the alarm started beeping. His oxygen saturation dropped to 71%. He was shaking uncontrollably, trying to reach for my hand, begging me to forgive him, to hold him, to tell him it would be okay. I didn't move. I let him feel every second of what he had done to me for 20 years. Then I turned off the camera. I ejected the memory card, slipped it into the locket I've worn around my neck since October 2004, the same locket that used to hold our wedding photo, and clicked it shut. I leaned over, kissed his forehead the way I did the morning everything began, and whispered the only truth he needed to take with him. I forgave you a long time ago, Mark. Forgiveness was never the point. Making you finally face the truth, that was. He died 11 days later, on October 16th, 2023, at 6:58 a.m. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. I buried him with a beautiful service. 300 people came,
They told me how lucky he was to have a wife who cared for him right to the end. Crystal vanished the day after the funeral. Condo emptied overnight, phone disconnected. Last sighting was a grainy ATM camera in Tampa withdrawing the maximum in cash while looking over her shoulder like someone was already behind her. She'll never stop looking. The evidence is still in my safe. Every terabyte, every photograph, every confession. Our children still have no idea. Maybe they never will.
Or maybe one day, when they're ready, I'll sit them down and play the video their father made with his dying breath. That decision belongs to me now. 20 years ago, I thought my heart was shattered beyond repair. Turns out, it wasn't shattered. It was forged. Forged in silence, in patience, in the kind of strength most people never have to find. So if you're listening to this, if you're carrying someone else's secret because you think love means swallowing poison day after day, please hear me. You are stronger than you know, and one day, when the time is exactly right, you get to decide whether they live with their lies or whether you make them choke on the truth. Thank you for staying with me. Some stories take 20 years to live and 2 hours to tell. This one was mine. Take care of yourselves. And never, ever underestimate a woman who's been smiling through the storm for 2 whole decades. The locket is warm against my skin. And for the first time in 20 years, I am finally completely free.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you're still here, drop a number 1 in the comments so I know you made it. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and subscribe for more true life confessions. I've added 2 listener favorites on the screen if you'd like to keep going. See you in the next one.